All right, good morning, guys, and happy Monday. This is TCI Lesson 17, Section 3, week of Monday 4/27. So if you guys recall to last week, we started looking at some of the factors that combined to result in the decline of feudalism in medieval Europe. The two factors that we looked at last week were political changes that were going on, mostly in England, and we looked at the effect of the bubonic plague on feudalism as well. So, like we talked about last week, we only covered sections 1 and 2, saving section 3 for this week. Section 3 is on the 100 Years' War, which we'll be talking about throughout this video. So, you guys will be happy to know that we only have the one section to look at today. But before we get into that actual content in this video, before we go through the slides, I do want to explain this week's work for you guys. So like usual, you will head into Schoology. Thought I had this queued up, sorry. Head to our page, down to the remote learning. Maybe we're gonna think about loading perhaps. All right, and then you're gonna click into this green folder here, the work of week of, 4/27. So in here, you guys will see an assignment. So again, this is one of those Schoology assignments that you will be able to click into. Once you've clicked into it, it'll have an option for you guys to select and open up the Google Doc. Again, it'll make a Google Doc solely for you guys. It'll give me an individual link to your work. And this is the Google Doc that you guys will see. So you have 2 steps to work through. The first is going to be to read or listen to the video lecture on TCI Lesson 17, Section 3. And then afterwards, you have 3 questions associated with the reading that I would like you to answer down here. You guys can just directly type your responses. After you've finished that up and answered your 3 questions, you're going to come down here to step 2, and you're going to watch Medieval Europe Crash Course European History number 1 with our dear friend John Green. He'll be helping us out this week. So you guys can click on this link here. It'll take you to the video, which I already have pulled up. And you have a 14-minute video that you guys will watch. This is kind of serving as an overview of the stuff that we've talked about the last few weeks before we start transitioning into our new topic. So once you guys have watched all 14 minutes of this video, or if you would like to answer the questions while the video is going, you have that option as well. But you have 6 questions that relate to that video. Okay, so you guys should be pretty familiar with this. We've watched a ton of these crash course videos. You know his style. Again, you know he talks fast. So if slowing him down is something that you need to do, you can slow him down by clicking into the settings button and then by clicking into playback speed. Okay, so if that'll help you out, you guys are more than welcome to slow him down and fill out those questions as you go. So that being said, after you have finished up all of those questions, just make sure you head back into Schoology, back into this assignment, and you actually have to hit submit, please. Okay, once you hit submit, I'll be able to click into here, and it will tell me whose work is ready to be graded. So again, since you have all of your assignments on this Google Doc, you guys do not have a discussion board post this week. All of your work, all of your assignment will be just on that Google Doc. So that being said, let's get back to our notes here and we will get started. Again, we're only doing one section today, so this video is going to be relatively quick, which is the good news. So these objectives in our essential question, they are the same as last week, but just as a review, our essential question is, how did events in Europe contribute to the decline of feudalism and the rise of democratic thought? And our objectives will be to describe significant medieval English legal and constitutional developments, such as the Magna Carta, which again we looked at last week. You guys should have already done this, but analyzing how the bubonic plague spread from Central Asia to Europe and how it impacted the population of Europe, along with the feudal system in Europe as well. And then lastly, our third objective, this is what we are heavily focusing in on today, which will be to summarize the impact of the 100 Years' War on feudalism in Europe. All right, so between 1337 and 1453, England and France fought a series of battles for control over land, over territory in modern day France. This long conflict, again, contributed to the decline of feudalism in England and in France as well. English monarchs had long claimed lands in France. This was because earlier English kings had actually been feudal lords over these French fiefs, or those French territories. French kings now disputed these claims. So when Philip VI of France declared that the French lands of Edward III, King of England, were a part of Philip's own realm, that prompted war to break out. Okay, so it is because of that declaration, it is because of that conflict over land between Philip VI of France and Edward III of England that the 100 Years' War began. So initially, the English started to be pretty successful right out of the gate. The first few battles that they won, they pulled off a lot of victories despite being outnumbered. What happened at the Battle of Crécy will actually demonstrate why that is. So even though the English had fewer soldiers, we're about to find out why they were so successful initially. So in the Battle of Crécy, two very, very different armies faced each other at that French village in 1346. The French had a feudal army that relied on horse-mounted knights. So they rode horseback. They were they were wearing their heavy armor, let's say, and their weapons were swords and lances. In contrast, so on the other end, the English army was comprised of lightly armored knights, foot soldiers, and archers with longbows. Some soldiers were even recruited from the common people, and they were paid to fight as well. So that is different from the French, because some of the foot soldiers that the French were using used crossbows, which were only effective at very, very short ranges. So that difference there between the crossbows used by the French and the longbows that were used by the English really proved to be that key factor there in helping the English pull off these initial successes. The longbow had many advantages over the crossbow. For one, larger arrows could be fired more quickly. The arrows flew farther, faster, and more accurately, and could pierce the armor of the time. So again, that is what helped the English to defeat the much larger French forces. So I did just realize that it might be helpful for you guys to see the difference. So we're gonna just head to Google. See if we can get some images for you guys. Oh, see, look, Robin Hood, there he is. Robin Hood's holding a longbow for us. Alright, well, this isn't quite as helpful as I wanted it to be. There we go, and that's an illustration of you guys what a crossbow would look like, okay? So that's just the distinction there of these two weapons that the English and the French were using. Where are we? All right. So the French fight back. The French slowly chipped away at the territory that the English had won in the early years of the war. In 1415, after a pretty long truce, King Henry V once again invaded France. This time, the English were met with stronger resistance, partly because the French were now using more modern military tactics. The French king was recruiting his army from commoners and paying them with money collected by taxes, just as the English did. Another reason for increased French resistance was a new sense of national identity and unity, meaning that they felt some pride for their country, that they wanted to do their part and keep the territory that they felt belonged to them. Part of this was that the French were inspired by a 17-year-old peasant girl. Today she is known as Joan of Arc. Joan claimed that she heard the voices of saints urging her to save France. So, disguised as a boy, she put on a suit of armor and she actually set out to fight and to aid the French. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about Joan of Arc. So, in 1429, Joan led an army, a French army, to victory in the Battle of Orleans. The following year, the Maid of Orleans, so Joan of Arc herself, she was actually captured by English allies. The English allies then handed her over to the English, who pushed certain church leaders to accuse Joan of being a witch and a heretic and to burn her at the stake. If you guys don't remember from a few of our earlier lessons, a heretic is a person who holds beliefs that are contrary to a set of religious teachings. Again, burning at the stake, that was a pretty common form of execution, specifically for those who were accused of witchcraft at the time. And it is just how it sounds. She was burned alive at the stake. However, it's Joan of Arc's heroism that changed the way many French men and women felt about their king and their nation. 22 years after Joan's death, the French finally drove the English out of France, and almost 500 years later, the Roman Catholic Church actually made Joan of Arc a saint. So lastly, we are going to talk about the impact of the 100 Years' War. Okay, so the 100 Years' War contributed to the decline of feudalism by helping to shift power from feudal lords to monarchs and common people. During the struggle, monarchs on both sides had collected taxes and raised large professional armies. As a result, kings no longer relied extensively on the nobles to supply knights for the army. Because remember, that is how the feudal system worked. If you're picturing that pyramid, if you are picturing the hierarchy, you have the kings who are at the top, or the monarchs that are at the top. Beneath them are the nobles who provide land to knights in exchange for military service. So because kings are raising professional armies, meaning that they are paying soldiers to fight, they're no longer reliant on that deal, that feudal deal, where in exchange for land, they get military support from both the nobles and the knights. They don't rely on that anymore. In addition, changes in military technology reduced the need for nobles, knights, and castles. So the longbow proved to be an effective weapon against mounted knights, and castles also became less effective as armies began using gunpowder to shoot iron balls from cannons and blast holes in castle walls. So again, kind of everything that the nobles had to offer. So their knights to fight for the king, their castles to serve for protection. They really proved to be pretty useless at this point with the new technology and with the new system of professional armies. The new feeling of nationalism also shifted power away from lords. So previously, many English and French peasants or common people felt more loyalty to their local lords than to their monarch overall. However, the war created a new sense of national unity and patriotism on both sides. In both England and France, commoners and peasants, they bore the heaviest burden of the war, meaning that it affected them most severely. It was most detrimental. It was the most negative for them, for the commoners. They were forced to fight and to pay higher and more frequent taxes. So as a result, those who survived the war were needed as soldiers and workers. And for this reason, the common people emerged from the Hundred Years' War with greater influence and more power, because again, they were more needed in society, and how society looked in general was also shifting as well. So guys, that is actually all we have for our video lecture this week. Again, this was only one section, so excuse me. Again, this was only one section. We covered the other two last week. So please make sure that you are going to head to Schoology now. You guys have your 3 questions based on that short TCI lesson, section 3. And then you have the video to watch as well, the John Green video. He does touch on the 100 Years' War as well. He'll go into a little bit of detail, provide you guys some further information about that conflict. All right, don't forget about, what am I looking for? Don't forget about our virtual office hours on Thursday morning at 11. I will send out a Google Meet link then. So for those of you who have been coming out every week, it's been awesome to see you guys, and I would love to see some new faces there as well. So make sure you guys are stopping by. Have a great week. As always, let me know if you have any questions. And that's it for me, guys. I'll see ya.